welcome to a brand new spoiler review episode for the Acolyte episode 4 here from the
Geek Buddies.
Hey! I love the faces that my compatriots make when I'm doing the intro, because I was like, is he going to land the plane? I don't know, it's a little shaky. It's a little shaky. Is he going to land the plane? But yes, landed the plane on this intro for sure, but I'm excited. Well, should I say excited? Well, I'm excited to talk about the episode with you guys. Maybe not excited coming out of this episode. So it's going to be an interesting conversation for sure. Here, episode 4, Day from the Acolyte. We are going to spoiler review this thing. So if you have not seen the episode, go back and watch it. Come back and hang out with us. Or if you don't care, just stick around because we're going to spoil the hell out of this thing. But we should introduce ourselves first. For those of you maybe new to our show, I am the outlaw John Rocha, writer, producer, and host here on the Geek Buddies.
I am Michael Vogel, writer and producer of animated TV shows and movies.
And this is Shannon McClung. I'm a television actor and an animation writer, where you can see some of our current work right now with all 3 seasons of Strawberry Shortcake, Berry in the Big City on YouTube, and the first 2 seasons on Netflix, and all 4 holiday specials, 2 which were written by that guy up there, on Netflix as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, there you go. And probably going to enjoy. Never mind. I shouldn't say that. All right. Let's jump into this. The Acolyte episode 4 Day. This one written by Claire Keekel. I hope I'm saying that right. And Cora Adana, directed by Alex Garcia Lopez, who's done episodes of The Witcher, Cowboy Bebop, and Daredevil. So good experienced director. And this is the shortest episode, I think, so far this season. 32 minutes, 34 minutes, something like that. Probably less than 30 with if you remove the credits. But basically, this focuses on May and Qimir here versus a team of assembled Jedi led by Master Soul, all headed to Khofar to apprehend May or to kill Kelnacca, depending on what side you are on this one. And it leads to the reveal of the Sith Lord confronting all the Jedi as we go to a black frame. So, Michael, your overall thoughts on this one? We had a Jedi Council. We had some back and forths. We had a trick back and forths, rather, about the killing a Jedi without a weapon. We have Qimir being betrayed, and then we have some conversations with Osha having to maybe confront herself and confront what happened with May in order for her to maybe come back to the Jedi Order. And then we end with that Sith Lord, as I said. So your thoughts, Mikey?
Talking about the Acolyte is wild. Like, I don't like this. The entire discussion and discourse around the Acolyte is so insane right now.
I know.
But I feel like as I was trying to figure out how I wanted to talk about this episode today, I feel like there's like 3 different things to talk about this episode. There is what the story actually is, like what the story Leslye Headland wants to tell in Star Wars, and what is happening, like as far as how it ties into the bigger lore and what is actually occurring, which I actually like.
Yeah.
Then there is the execution, the writing, the directing, the way the story is being told, which at this point I think I'm very much not enjoying.
Okay.
Then there is the fan reactions to the Acolyte, which are actually driving me absolutely insane. So it's sort of like, as you're experiencing the Acolyte right now as a fan, there's like, what is the story and how does this tie into the lore? How does it actually work in the episode? And then you get off that and you go onto YouTube and you see everybody's reaction and you just want to like just collapse and die. So I actually like the story that is being told, I think. I mean, I won't know until all 8 episodes are in, but I think there's a lot of interesting things to discuss as a fan of Star Wars, a fan of the lore, a fan of the canon. The execution leaves a ton to be desired. And then, the fan stuff is wild.
Yeah. But what about the episode? What did you think of the episode? That's what I asked you about. What did you think overall of the episode?
I like what they're trying to do, and I don't think they're doing it very well.
But that's okay. That's as succinct as it get. All right, Shannon, your thoughts overall. Episode 4 here.
The fan reaction, for the most part, I guess I don't go on social media enough or the internet enough to kind of gauge what the response has been. I just know what your guys' response is and what my response is. And I think with most Star Wars series, excluding the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian and Andor, live action Star Wars, everything starts off and it's like, okay, maybe I'm not loving everything, but it's Star Wars and I'm happy. I keep waiting for the moment for it to turn around. And historically at this point, it hasn't. So depending on what the extra flashbacks we're going to get, where we find out what actually happened with the 4 Jedi and the witches, at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, this isn't going to turn around. Like some of the some of the poor execution that is being made, and there are a handful of decisions in this episode that I'm like, this is just bad directing. There are a handful of the decisions that were made that I'm like, it's like you don't know what you're doing, and I don't know who where the blame fully lies for that, because with TV, most TV series, you don't always blame the director. The director is kind of a hired gun. You typically go for the showrunner, and the showrunner is Leslye Headland. But at the same time, the people at Lucasfilm, people at Disney, the people that the executives that oversee this are looking at this and at least at one point are going, great, green light, let's go. So it's just kind of like there's some really, really poor decisions being made across the board. That it just, even with the story, there are things that are happening that I'm like, maybe this is going to be better when you watch it all 8 episodes back to back to back to back. But at this point, with a week to week drop format, it's like just is not satisfying. And a lot of this was just kind of boring, like a stroll through the woods where it's a lot of like back and forth, and we're not really getting any great information. And some of the acting is kind of wooden, is kind of stilted, just kind of soulless. So this was probably the most frustrating episode, because this is where I accepted this ain't going to change. Like this is probably what the show is going to be.
Yeah, I will say this is the most disappointing of the first 4 episodes, and because of the issues Michael brought up earlier, I think the execution here is lacking. And the more I look at this, and listen, I spent a little bit of time this week watching some Leslye Headland interviews on the red carpet and on, just talking to people about it. She is very well aware of the Star Wars universe and the Star Wars approach to this and what's going on at the time of the Jedi right now, 100 years before the prequels. She is very clear about and knowledgeable about the lore and the canon and what's happening. And she's connecting the Jedi fracturing, the Jedi issues, the losing of the power a little bit, the issues with the Senate, to what's happening here in the show, to what we see later on. So this is like laying the groundwork for the cracks and the fissures in the Jedi order and the Jedi ruling of things with the Republic that's going to lead to what happens here in the prequel. So I understand the approach, but there is something missing here that I've hit on in the last 3 reviews, that it doesn't feel like the stakes are there. At the beginning, it's Osha going, hey, Jecki, you know what? I'm going to take off. The Jedi maze you guys issues. Take care, everybody. I'm going to go back to working on my ships. There's just this like, hey, it's your sister. She's back after 16 years. She is killing a Jedi, and you're rolling on out of here. And these are the frustrating things when I look at this that just bother me. There's not enough weight. Jecki, we're 4 episodes in, and Jecki is just quoting something out of the Jedi Bible every time she has an interaction, and you're giving her nothing to do. And it's so frustrating to see that with some of these characters. And then you have a random twist. Hey, you know what? Screw you, Qimir. I'm rolling on out of here. And there's been no buildup to that moment at all. And that's the frustrating part. So, Shannon, I think you hit on it right. It's like somewhere somebody got involved with this, changed this around from what it was originally going to be. And now we're left with this little bit of a mess. And it reminds me of Joss Whedon's Justice League. Like, you can tell there are 2 completely different approaches happening within the movie, like Brave, like Pixar's Brave. Like, you can tell there are 2 different approaches in terms of tones and sentiment and what you're supposed to get out of this. And it's frustrating because I think there's a great darker story to be told here that is getting mixed up with all this other stuff that's somewhat fan service to the younger performers. And so it frustrates me on so many levels. But let's get into the specifics here. We'll break it all down and have our spoiler review conversation. We open with Kelnacca walking back to his place, which basically reads self-imposed exile. We see that he's got the bowcaster there, which is, of course, standard Wookiee weaponage there. And then we see the spiral designs that match the designs tattooed on the witches of Brendok. So an interesting little clue there for what that might be. Is he tortured by all of this? What happened? We still don't know necessarily. Then we go to Coruscant. Osha tells Jecki she's leaving. As I said, says, May is the Jedi's problem. I am not a Jedi. Jecki says, it's cool, but did you talk to Soul? And she's like, you know what? I kind of caused him enough trouble. I'm getting out of here. But then we cut to Soul in the council, and they question who May's master might be. And there's talk about a splinter order possibly. And then we see young Ki-Ad-Mundi in there, and he is credited, so it is him who was there as a member of the Jedi Council in the prequels and the Clone Wars. Well, here he is hanging out here, and he is also best known for what he said in The Phantom Menace about the Sith being extinct for a millennium. So how are you going to connect that up? Then Vernestra comes in, and this is interesting because Vernestra comes in passive-aggressively jabbing at Sol, and then claims that Mae's been trained by a Jedi, because you can tell that from the holograph there, and insists that this information should not be raised to the High Council because the Senate will become aware of it, which basically implies we're going to get ourselves in trouble. Let's keep it amongst ourselves. Let's try to put a lid on it. Let's cover it up if we can. And then Vernestra calls for Kelnacca to be recalled from Khofar, thinks Mae won't be an issue. And then Sol comes after Vernestra, and Vernestra criticizes him for not realizing that Mae survived the fire in Brendok. Sol wants to bring Mae in with his team. They discuss her master's, quote, larger plan, and the Vernestra feels that a shift might tip the scales here. And Sol basically implies that he wants to use Osha as bait. So, Mike, this is a hell of a beginning. We get the spirals. We get this council meeting. We get Vernestra essentially wanting to get everybody involved in a cover-up and ending the media immediately. And then now implying that, or now confronting Sol about not sensing Mae's survival of the fall, which is standard in Star Wars. The Palpatine now and Darth Maul for surviving fall. So your thoughts on this opening here?
Apparently in Star Wars, if you fall into a giant pit or if you get stabbed by a lightsaber, you're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine.
Don't worry about it. You're fine. It's good. Yeah, so like the Kelnacca opening was fine. It's really from the moment the episode started, I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, like, yep, we're on Khofar. There's Kelnacca. The spirals. He's clearly been obsessed with this for a long time. So whatever it was that happened, I've seen a lot of people conjecturing, which I kind of agree. Like, I'm wondering, because we've seen in the trailers at one point, one of the few things that we haven't seen actually in the episodes yet is Torben and Kelnacca fighting.
Yes,
like they fight each other in the trailer.
Right.
So a lot of people are conjecturing, is it Coral takes over their minds the way that we saw happen in the last episode, and that's why Torben has the scar and why the two of them particularly are so fucked up. Like whatever goes down, those two are the most fucked up about it. And it was all fine. There wasn't anything great about it, but I was like, okay, I got it. Nice setup. Nothing's really there wasn't like a bigger artistry to it. But yeah, then you get to that Osha scene, and this I had to pause it and just be like, okay. Osha's the main character of the show, ostensibly. Yeah. Osha and Mae are the main characters. We're 4 episodes in.
Yeah.
And Osha's just reacted to everything. We actually don't really know what Osha as a character wants. As far as we can tell, she just wants to go back and live as a mechanic. But like, us taking the flashback episode out, the big thing here is that Osha and Mae at the end of episode 2 find out the other one is alive.
Yes.
That's big.
Right.
And now I think it's completely valid for them to say Osha doesn't want anything to do with Mae, particularly after what we saw in the 3rd episode. But just going, yep, okay, not my thing. That's the Jedi's problem. My murderous sister. I'm out. Like, what you want to have happen here that doesn't seem to be happening in this show is Osha to get emotion, like be like, look, I get that this is a big deal. You don't understand. I cannot deal with her. I cannot. This is too much for me. I can't do this. And then get pulled into it. Yeah. But having like a casual, no, that's not my thing. I don't care. That's my murder sister. You go deal with it. Like it felt, to your point, and this is what you said from episode 1. So, I think you were right and dead on. It just feels so low stakes. Yeah. And for Osha and Mae to be brought back together like this, particularly as Mae is going to make the exact opposite decision a little bit further into this episode, you want these decisions about my long lost sister who I thought was dead to be charged with emotion, and it just feels casual. Yeah. So that was very kind of, again, the choice that she doesn't want any part of this from a storytelling standpoint. I'm like, okay, fine. Totally. But the execution of it, I was like, I just feel like everything is really dull. Yeah. And then the Jedi, all of them kind of like, talking about Mae and what's going on. I mean, this is obviously like a lot of people are upset about the Ki-Ad-Mundi thing. Look, as John just said, Leslye Headland knows her Star Wars lore. Yeah. And particularly since based on like Star Wars websites, Ki-Ad-Mundi wasn't even born for 40 years after this. And the fact that they decided to sort of bring him in anyways, I don't think it's unintentional that you brought the guy that says the Sith haven't been around for over a millennia into this discussion. I feel like literally pulling his birth up and putting him here, that doesn't bother me a lot. Like that's in fan sites and like it's in Star Wars websites when he was born. If they're going to say he was born a little bit earlier to tell the story and there's a good reason for it, I don't feel like that is a egregious, you broke Star Wars, how dare you thing you did.
Right.
If there's a good reason. Like, I think where everyone is kind of saying, oh, he's here, and this negates what he says in Phantom Menace, if that ends up being the case, yeah, then I don't understand why they put him here. It feels like he's here because when the dust settles on this, it's going to recontextualize what he says in Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
It feels like if he's in Phantom Menace going, oh, Sith weren't around, and I'm like, motherfucker, you were there. Why are you covering this up all this time, all these years? Like, and if that's what she's doing, that's interesting to me. The other thing that was a little bit surprising is I kind of just assumed based on the way Vernestra carried herself in the first couple episodes, she was on the High Council.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're now sort of saying, oh, we're these other Jedi over here and we don't want to tell the High Council about this. I was like, oh, I think that could have been cleared up a little bit. But again, everything that's happening here. So the Jedi are aware of what's going on. They want to go pull Kelnacca out. Like, there is what's going on. Who trained this person? Nobody has really said the word Sith yet. I think they're still sort of like, that can't possibly be the case, but what Jedi trained May? Like, what are we doing? And Vernestra's desire to sort of bottle this up. You know, again, I think the other thing that Leslye Headland is doing here, which from a storytelling and Star Wars lore standpoint, I appreciate, is by the time we get to Phantom Menace, the Jedi are kind of working with the Senate already, like really, you know, kind of keeping everything bottled up, very strict and stringent, locked down on a lot of things. And it feels like what's happening here can inform a lot of that. Like, oh shit, because this shit went down and some Jedi were like, lock it up. We got to be super strict and super tight. And then you get to Phantom Menace. There's a good story there. I just don't know that they're telling it in the best way. Yeah.
Shannon, your thoughts on this opening, and what are your thoughts on Kelnacca and the spirals? What are your thoughts on that being there, something that's torturing him clearly, Ki-Ad-Mundi, and what we see between Vernestra and Sol in this back and forth?
I mean, basically what Vogel said about Kelnacca is like, okay, whatever has happened in the past, it is staying with him to the degree that he has sort of isolated himself from his post. Like, he's supposed to be on Khofar, but he's abandoned that post and he's gone into the woods to live like a hermit. So the whole idea that spiral is staying with him, that, like, okay, it's intriguing. I'm curious what the reason is behind it. The conversation between Osha and Jecki, it's very kind of loaded with subtextual emotion. And at this point, based off of what we've seen, I'm like, I don't think they've done enough to warrant this.
Agreed. Yeah.
But it's kind of like, okay, this is the decision you've made. Okay. Osha's point of view is just very, very unclear. Like, she deliberately let her sister go. But now she's saying, hey, she's the Jedi's problem. And I'm kind of like, okay, you don't want to be the one to apprehend your sister. I got it. But then she does go along on this mission. So it's like the shifting POV, it just doesn't make sense to me. And when we get into the chamber where the Jedi are looking at the footage of May and her fighting, again, this was just directed very uninterestingly. Like, you have a hologram of May doing these incredible Jedi moves that you never really push in on. You never really push in on Ki-Ad-Mundi. You never push in on the other Jedi that are there. You push in on Sol, which, you know, I love Jung-jae, and then you push in on Vernestra, who I'm like, again, this is a mannequin talking. Like, there is nothing behind this. So it's very difficult.
Oh my God.
It's very difficult to get invested in what they're saying. I mean, all of the Jedi right now are coming off a little lifeless. And I get that to a degree, like, that's kind of how they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be not have any sort of emotional attachments. But unless you have a really good actor who has some sort of internal life going on under those lines, then it's sock puppets. It's literally just it's meat puppets. It's just people reciting lines and there's nothing behind it. and it's just really difficult to emotionally. Am I going too far right now?
You know what? Do your thing, brother. Do your thing. You're a working actor who books consistently. I think you have a right to speculate on what you think is good acting and what isn't. So go ahead. Yes.
And again, I'm not fully blaming the actors here, because
fair point.
Sometimes if you are not being supported by the writing, if you're not being supported by the direction, there's only so much you can do other than standing on a tee and reciting the words that were on the page. I mean, they have to give you the tools that you need. And at this point, a lot of the actors, not all of them, a lot of the actors are not getting the tools that they need to succeed.
Yeah. I have to agree with you. We're watching these scenes because I watched the episode 3 times. The third, Rebecca is a good actress for the things that I've seen her in. I don't want to say this in a way that's mean, but I feel like she's out of her depth here because there isn't a lot of time. And so you've got to give these words a lot of weight and resonance. I mean, talking about a shift and you sense that something is happening here. A larger plan is at play. You don't know who the master is. You got to get to May. And you're doing passive aggressive shots at Soul rather than why didn't you, it should have been much more heavier, weightier, stronger, more emotional, so that Soul's back on his heels a little bit about this whole situation and going no, let me go. I can find her, whatever. And so you get a different reaction in the interaction. So I don't disagree with you, Shannon, on that end. I also think the same thing with Amandla and Dafne. They're not being given enough. They have done nothing to really foster this relationship. Occasional back and forths for 30 seconds in an episode is not enough to build a relationship. And I think the fault of this episode is this shouldn't have been the 32-minute episode. This should have been a 55-minute episode where we go deep into this relationship between May and Osha. We see the reaction of the 16 years. What is May's actual reaction to this? What is Osha's actual reaction to this? She's bebopping with her droid as she's walking out before Soul stops her. So these things lend themselves to how can you be so callous about the fact that your twin sister is killing Master Jedi? And by the way, making her way towards the guy who trained you and saved you and was there on Brendok. It is just confounding on so many levels. Sorry, Mike, you wanted to jump in?
Well, no, because to what you're saying, to your point and to Shannon's point, I know we have to talk about the rest of this episode, but if you just again, don't change anything really. Have Osha and Jecki have an interaction, cut to this Jedi scene. But if Osha, instead of just chilling and watching Jecki training, is waiting outside of a closed door room where all the Jedi are talking and wondering are they going to kill her sister? Are they going to try and bring her? What are they going to do with May? And then Jecki's like, what are you going to do? She's like, I'm going to leave. I can't deal with this, but I just want to find out what's going on or whatever. But she's still going to leave. And then in cutting into the room, and instead of the room just being kind of an open room where everyone's just chatting, have Vernestra shut those doors, shut everything down. They're in the dark. It's enclosed. And they're like, do not tell anybody else about this. And just giving that sense of hey guys, this is a need to know basis only. Right. We do not want this information getting out even to other people in the building. But it just, everyone's just there's a casualness to everything that makes everything feel a lack of import.
Yeah. And even what if she hears Jecki training and that triggers a memory? And I know Star Wars flashbacks, but it can be useful in certain moments. That triggers the memory, and then she's back in this place and she's having this confrontation with Soul. She's talking about how much she misses May, the guilt over May, the anger over May. Then you've got a little more weight to this character that you've spent some time on. So yeah, great point you make, Michael. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to.
Can I add one thing just about the Ki-Ad-Mundi thing?
I'll take a break after this, and we'll get into everything on Khofar. So go ahead, brother.
So I do agree that the inclusion of Ki-Ad-Mundi, the altering of his birth, that is being done on purpose. My fear, based off of what we have gotten with some of the unimaginative decisions that they've made, is we're going to get Bail Organa at the end of episode 3 saying, "Hey, wipe the protocol droid's mind." You know what I mean? The whole idea that 3PO was present for everything, and then suddenly in episode 4 he doesn't remember anything. It's something happened. No, Bail Organa said, "Oh yeah, he's seen too much. Just wipe his mind." And that's my fear with this: is Ki-Ad-Mundi's "Oh well, we can never talk about this," and that's going to be it.
And this is why I want all the emails to be released. I want to find out who made this decision. I want to know because and I say this because Leslye is taking all the hits. All these people who want to come after her because she's a woman and because she's gay, they are coming after her big time. Meanwhile, homie with the cowboy hat is sitting with the cigar lit with his legs up on the desk, and that isn't fair. More people need to be called out about what the anger is about, the mixture of this show, and I'm just tired of it always being Leslye getting the shit.
I did hear from somebody.
Yes.
That, how's the best way to put this? That Leslye Headland's idea for the way she wanted to tell this story was much more Russian doll, much more involved, much more detailed, and that through the development process of, well, this is Star Wars, we want to make sure everybody gets it, this is like that, a lot of her big ideas did get pulled back a bit.
Yeah. My name is Dave Filoni and I hate Andor. Yes, no surprise. I've heard similar things, Michael. Let me just say that. All right, let's take a break. We'll jump into everything on Khofar here right after this. That's the best one we've done. That's the best one we've done. Let's move on here.
That's Chewie humming along in the cantina.
All right, so let's start with this relationship between Mae and Qimir. Mae is dealing, or is it Qimir? I don't know how you
Qimir.
Fine, Qimir, fine. Mae and Qimir.
I just like listening to you say it differently every time you say it. It's been enjoyable for the past few weeks.
At least I've got the consonants in the right order. Mae is dealing with the Osha reveal, I guess. She's walking. Qimir reminds her that she still has to kill the Jedi responsible for what happened on Brendok because Mae is kind of wavering. He senses that Mae is wavering. He's a bumbling idiot. This is so similar to Sherlock and Moriarty in my mind, maybe. So we will see. We find out that he is in just as deep with the master as she is, and says he, quote, owes him or whatever that may be. He says she has to kill Kelnacca without a weapon. Mae wants to know what Osha was like when they're walking, and so she's clearly interested in finding out more about her sister and what condition she's in. We could have had so many of these scenes on the ship before they even landed, but it's all happening here in the walk, and then Mae needs a break all of a sudden, which frustrates Qimir. When they're so close to, quote, completing her final lesson, Qimir finally capitulates, goes to get water for Mae. But as he's getting it, he hears her screaming, runs back, and bang, he's in a trap. Mae reveals that she wants to break off her deal with their master. And now that Osha is alive, she's second-guessing everything, and she wants to repair that relationship and turn herself into the Kelnacca and turn herself into the Jedi. So, Shannon, your thoughts on these interactions and where we led to in the trap, and all of a sudden Mae going, you know what, I'm going to turn myself in.
Yeah, so the way that this section starts, that we see the ship coming into Khofar and we see it land, and then there's an immediate wipe, and this is one of the dumb directorial decisions that was made. Yeah. We see the ship land, we get the wipe, the camera is about 20 feet closer, and we're just off to the side of the ship. And it's like, the wipes are for transition. Like, this is why? Like, I get that to show a CG ship come into a live action environment, see it land, and to have people get off that ship, that's an expensive shot. Like, absolutely, totally get it. There are more creative ways to do it rather than having the CG ship land, wipe, and now we're off the ship. It's like, already have them walking. Like why? It is just such a jarring cut that it just baffles my mind. I mean, and you don't have to change the dialogue. Like, literally, Mae's charging in, and Qimir is just like, whoa, don't be so fast, because this is what is. But all this, there's bounty hunters that are afraid to go in there. There's just so many easy fixes, and again, this is what worries me about the execution of the show as we get closer to the finale, is just the lack of imagination that is being used. And it's just shocking for a franchise that is known for its imagination. It's just so cut and dry and just so kind of dumb and boring. Qimir's dialogue to her, when he's basically saying, and Manny Jacinto has some funny lines here, where he's just like, hey, so how are you planning to do this? You've failed so much to this point, which I think is a funny dig. But at the same time, it's like, you gave her the poison to kill Tor. You were the one who did this. So it just doesn't connect. And throughout this episode, I mean, again, it's just kind of a boring walk through the woods. There's a lot of walking and talking, and nothing that interesting happens. Also, I think Qimir and May walk really slowly.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the Jedi are on a ship as they've already set off on their journey.
Yeah.
Like they catch up real fast.
It's like Game of Thrones travel. Like all of a sudden you're here. Yeah.
For one of them.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
But then as we get to like May wants to take a break. She's like, I'm gonna have to fight a Wookiee without a weapon. I need to rest. She's like, I want this more than anything. And if I don't do it, he's gonna kill me. And it's just like, what all did he say to you? Because this is a lot of information, again, that doesn't necessarily connect. I mean, the moment that Qimir comes back and he steps into the trap, and May has made that decision that, like, nope, I'm not loyal. I don't need to do this. Like, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna go be loyal to my sister. I'm gonna turn myself into this Jedi. And Qimir suddenly is like, well, he's gonna kill you. He's like, only if he can find me. Like, it's just loaded with kind of nothing. There was just kind of a lot of hot air in this episode. Like, you had one or two moments that I was like, oh, that's an interesting line of dialogue. Oh, that was a great line delivery. But for the most part, this was just sort of like, it's a lot of build up to nothing.
Yeah. Mike, your thoughts on these interactions here with Qimir and May here leading to the trap?
I think the big issue with May in this episode is when she all of a sudden like traps Qimir and is like, Osha being back is the most important thing. Well, she hasn't said that at any previous scene in this episode.
Yeah.
And when you have an episode like that, particularly where you have these characters where kind of we're not quite sure how they feel about each other, and it's a lot of back and forth. Like, again, taking the flashback episode out, the last thing that we saw from May was she saw that Osha was alive. She said Oshi, and she drove off.
Yeah.
Again, not changing any of really the information or that is exposited between the two of them. If she got off that ship and from get-go was like, I can't believe Osha's still alive. Like, I don't know. Like, this is weird. And Qimir was sort of pushing her forward, which is kind of what he's doing.
Yeah.
And if we just got right away that this knowledge, but she gets off and she's like, all right, got to kill a Wookiee. You already did this. You went out there. Like, there was a lot of stuff that you're like, that's all fine. Her drive in this episode is May is going to make a drastic change in episode 4 that is not what we are expecting.
Yeah.
So if her motivation through all of this is like, okay, and if Qimir's like, hey, remember, you got to kill the Wookiee. Master said he's going to kill you. She's like, yeah, no, I know. So wait, but if Osha's alive, like if she had just really been focused on that the entire walk, then when she traps Qimir and says, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Osha being back, we would go, okay, like clearly that's been bothering you ever since you saw her.
Right.
This makes sense. So again, where they end up with May, I think is super cool and interesting. I think May all of a sudden deciding, I don't want to kill Kelnacca, going in, seeing he's dead. Like, I think from a storytelling standpoint, all really good stuff. Qimir is definitely Darth Teeth, right? Like, that's Qimir.
I'm not going to say yes or no.
It's him. But also...
So he can't sense a trap? Okay.
He wants to be trapped.
Okay.
He's not... He's like,
Maybe.
he's planned this whole thing out. Like, this wasn't a shock to him. Like, look, Darth Teeth at the end of this episode, clearly everything is doing the way he wanted it to go. But also, I don't know that he is the master.
Right.
I don't think he's the master.
Yeah.
I think there is a master. Maybe it's Darth Plagueis. Maybe it's not. I don't know. We're going to see.
Yeah.
I think Qimir is the other Sith Lord or the apprentice.
Yes.
And just like Dooku was Sidious's apprentice, but had an acolyte in Asajj Ventress, I think that this May and Osha are kind of trying to fill that Asajj Ventress role. So I do think Qimir is Darth Teeth, but I think that also there's a bigger bad behind him. So when he says, I owe this guy, like we think they're both talking about who we see at the end of this episode when we talk about the master. Right. I don't think that's the case, but I think that's definitely like Qimir at this point. And again, I think at this point, it's almost like disappointing because it's so obvious, but between episode 2 and episode 4, everything out of his mouth, I'm like, okay, you are clearly leading her. Like you are clearly pushing her into this place where you really want her to kill a Jedi without using a weapon. And to Shannon's point about the poison, that didn't bother me as much because he's clearly like, I think he's pushing May the way he wants her, but I think he kind of wants Osha too. I do think, even though I'm loath to say this because I hate Rise of Skywalker, but it does seem like we're going for a whole dyad, a Force dyad thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have two people that are connected through the Force, whatever. So it does seem like whatever the big plan here is involves Osha and May. So we'll see. But again, all the stuff between the two of them and where they end up, Qimir being trapped and then sort of being gone, and when the bad guy shows up, and then May making this decision, going in and finding Kelnacca, like where we end up, like storytelling wise, this is good, but man, the execution really just irked me throughout.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it's too lightweight. It's not weighty enough. It doesn't have enough of the oomph behind it. There's not enough of the gravitas, for lack of a better term, of the situation. There's not a real sensing of what's going on. And I get it. If, like you said, you want to go in, but maybe somebody went in and was like, no, we got to make it a little more lighthearted. We don't want to bring the fans down. They get so mad about the dark stuff. So let's have the dark stuff, but let's have little fun, cutesy moments as well. And hey, look, I'll stumble over this and I'll talk like this. And you know what? You need a break. It's fine. Okay, fine. I'll go get you some water. This kind of stuff that just really rips away the weight of what's happening here. And in your point of view, you think it's all manipulated. I'm not there yet. So I'm saying it from my point of view that I don't agree with that just yet. I'm just seeing this as kind of lightweight in how I'm doing. But your point is absolutely right. It's in the fact that the execution of it all has not been effective enough to make the turn make sense. The turn is so out of the blue, and not out of the blue in a way that we can cheer for it, right? You want to cheer because Soul set us up for this in the earlier interaction with Osha when he's like convincing her to come with him. He says, don't give up on May. There is good in May. I know there's good in May. That's laying the groundwork for this turn. But you've got to make that turn make sense so that when it happens, it surprises us and we cheer for it. And we didn't. We went like, what? So that's not what you want when one of your main characters, you said, Michael, makes the turn. So all right, let's move on here to Osha and the Jedi. Soul catches Osha, as I said, before she leaves, convinces her to join them. She seems to be okay with being the bait, and tells her to believe in the good in May. Then Soul, Jecki, Osha, and Yord head to Khofar. Shout out to the Yord Horde. We meet an adorable Tynan. Let me take a look at this guy here. Where is it? This guy, Basil. During Yord's briefing, who is messing with the droid there. By the way, Tynans were first introduced in the 1979 novel Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley, and this is the first time they've made their live-action debut in Star Wars. That's pretty cool. They land on Khofar, and Jecki gets the 411 from the locals of where Kelnacca is. Yord wants Osha to hand over her blaster. She refuses playfully, but later, Osha asks Yord to take out May if she can. Yord, I think this is the best scene of Yord so far, and pushes back on all you fools who are hating on Yord. He says May has always been her wound since she's known her, and that Soul may have brought Osha here to not only face May, but to face herself. Well, we've seen that in Star Wars many times. And this is connected to what happened on Brendok. So, and then Basil leads the way in the forest. We go into the forest full of insects of unusual sizes, also known as Uber moths. Soul and Jecki talk about her issues with her sister and how it affected her becoming a Jedi. And Jecki, as I said, drops stuff out of the Jedi Bible. We are not defined by what we lost, but rather by what we survived. High five. Basil is missing, has gone ahead. Basil crosses paths with May, who alerts the Jedi he's found May. As the Jedi come in, Soul promises Osha that once they capture May, he'll tell her everything that's happened. That's pretty big. But before the Jedi can get there, May breaks into Kelnacca's home, where she discovers that Kelnacca's already been killed, and the wounds are fresh as smoke is still coming off from the lightsaber strikes. The Jedi descend upon Kelnacca's place, order May out. May realizes she's about to be framed for murder, but before they can apprehend her, Darth Teeth, as Vogel calls him, or rather Soul senses that they're about to be ambushed, and then Darth Teeth shows up, and in horror, he force levitates, which a Sith can do, right behind Osha. It's like Jaws, for God's sake. So I call him Darth Jaws, but Darth Teeth is fine. Moves Osha out of the way and then destroys the Jedi all in one hand motion, and we go to black frame. So, Michael, your thoughts on these interactions and what we led to with your boy Darth Teeth?
Well, I will say, I was watching it when they're all on the ship, when Basil shows up and gets spit on by Osha's droid. I did go, okay, well, Rocha's right. This is a moment for the kids, and it's not landing for me. So there you go.
Somebody mark that time code.
Yeah. Rocha on that. I was like, I literally am watching it last night, and I'm like, well, can't argue with Rocha on that one. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that even with that Saul scene with Osha, like right before that, where he's kind of convincing her to go, I think if Osha was very much like, I don't want to go, I don't want to deal with this May thing.
Yeah.
But if he was like, look, if we don't go, I'm worried what's going to happen. Like if we just pushing on these emotional moments a little bit to really like have a clear want of Osha not wanting to be there because this is too much for her and getting pulled in because she's worried about it's just like, there's just, again, the choice to where they end up is fine, but the way they got there and just the dialogue and the execution, it was like, it could have been stronger. It just feels a little light.
Yeah.
I guess it has to be said, people going crazy online right now because of the they pronoun when Osha's asking if Basil is a he or a they. Guys, shut up. Like, do we even know what sex Basil is by looking at him? Like, it's the most natural thing, but like everyone, like I open up Twitter and it's like, well, there it is. They, them pronouns. They've ruined Star Wars. I'm like, there's a lot of things to critique about this show. And I think the three of us are talking about a lot of the things that aren't working. But when you like dive to those things, it's like, that's what undercuts all of your other critiques. So just stop. That's all I have to say about that. But once they get to the planet, it's a long walk that's not that interesting. And I think, and Shannon can hit on this, I'm sure it bothered him as well, but like when you get to a giant forest full of big roly-polies wrapped around trees, and you're like, okay, and you wake one of them up, the scene that you want is they get rid of the one and then all of the other ones start rustling, and then you have this giant Jedi battle with a bunch of flying roly-polies, and like that would be a fucking awesome scene. But instead we get one of them who flies directly at a lightsaber and gets sliced. Like there's not even he basically goes like this. Cool. Like it was just so unexciting.
And then you gave one of the Jedi, hey, they're attracted to the light. What?
Yeah, it's just like, it's just like there's 1,000 ways that idea of a sequence could have been, holy shit, this is a fucking awesome Star Wars Jedi monster battle sequence. Yeah. And look, I get budget and I get time and everything, but like they're spending a lot of money on this show, and Star Wars is important to the brand. Yeah. So this is a moment where you're like, oh, let's have this moment happen. Like, like it just like, I watched that scene and I was like, okay, come on, guys. Then, they make their way to where Kelnacca is. And I thought the Yord scene with Osha, I agree, was actually a good scene. Like, I got no notes on that scene. I was like, that was fine. Like Osha kind of going, okay, like, I don't know that I can deal with this May thing. Will you deal with it? And him being like, all of that was good. And even Jecki and Osha talking post the thing, I agree that I want more from Jecki. And I think Dafne Keen is so great in that role that I want more. But I like that Osha's force sensitivity is coming back. Like there's a lot of important things happening here that I'm like, okay, that's all cool. But yeah, then they get to Kelnacca's place. May is inside. She discovers Kelnacca with a fresh wound because Qimir clearly just did that. And then the Jedi all show up. And look, I know some people don't love it. I actually thought the reveal of Darth Jaws or Darth Teeth was cool. I think seeing him float down out of focus behind her, I was like, all right, that's actually a pretty cool shot. Yeah. Like that, I kind of thought was neat. I was into
agree.
That. I liked that when you were describing it, you said he pushes Osha aside. He hurls her.
Fair enough.
Like her bones would be broken. Like she gets wiped to the side, and then all of the Jedi light their lightsabers, and you're like, okay, here we go. This is awesome. And then, as with every other episode, it ends so oddly and abruptly that I was like, what are you doing? Like, clearly at this point, you're like, this is a choice. Yeah. Like they had this idea that they're like, we're going to have these episodes and they're just going to end like with a punch and a bang. And there's clearly an idea that they had that, again, I can see that might be a really cool idea in theory. And maybe there's a way to do it. But in execution, every time an episode has ended in 4 episodes, I'm just like, what? Which is not how you want to end.
Yeah, and I think this is a good, excellent point you bring up here, Michael, because, as much as we want to go in on some of the fans who go in on the pronouns and stuff and get upset about it, the Uber fans defending this, going like, have you never seen a cliffhanger in a show? These bad faith arguments that are like, you can't do bad cliffhangers? They're bad cliffhangers, and that's what's being called out here. It's not because they are cliffhangers. It's because they're bad cliffhangers. That's what's being called out here. So both sides going extreme in their defenses or attacks on the show, I think it is not helpful in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, you make an excellent point about the rodents or the insects of unusual sizes. I want credit for that. And I think you're right. There should have been a battle, because you know what this battle happens? You know what it shows, rather? It shows what Yord can do with a lightsaber. It shows what Jecki can do with a lightsaber. It shows also that Osha's force power in a moment as it's coming back, maybe she uses it in a certain way. So there's a way to further the character development of these actors by having them get into a big battle with these insects. And so I think roly-polies, whatever, I think that could have been a great way to showcase them. Shannon, your thoughts here on everything that happened on this walk, good walk spoiled all the way to Kelnacca's place.
Yeah, I got my pitch for the action scene. But going back to Sol and Osha, when she said at the beginning, like, it was her decision to leave the Jedi Order. But when Sol is talking about her, going on this mission, like, if you come, they'll let us both go. She's like, oh, do you want me to rejoin the Jedi Order? The vibe that we're getting is like, it was her choice. Not really. Because of the fact that she was always kind of dealing with that the grief of losing her family. The moment where she says, and again, to me, this is another directorial ball that was dropped, when she says, I'm not wearing that civilian robe, and it cuts over to her just kind of sitting there, not necessarily looking happy, but there's a way to juice that comedically. One, it doesn't look like a robe. It looks like a white outfit. What you need to do is you need to have her sit into frame with the robe kind of like, it's uncomfortable. And then you see Basil is wearing the same thing. So there's a way to do it. The way that they chose, because she hit civilian really hard, we don't get confirmation that is what she's wearing until Yord says, basically he calls her out for talking during his briefing. He's like, do you have something to add, civilian, or whatever, however he says it. But then she's like, no, Yord, very comprehensive. And it's just kind of like, we don't get enough for that joke to work, for her to say very comprehensive. So again, that whole sequence just needed to be zhuzhed a little bit. They get in with the walking and the talking. And I do agree that I thought that Yord scene, the Yord and Osha scene, I thought was good. I like Jecki's, I like Jecki's Jedi nuggets of wisdom. We're not defined by what we lose. We're defined by what we survive. I'm like, oh, that's a nice bit of dialogue that probably is going to, come down the line. Yeah.
And I'm not criticizing the frame. I'm criticizing that's all she's being used for. That's my criticism. Go ahead.
Your critique is made clear. You hate Dafne Keen. John, it's okay. It's okay. I don't think Rebecca Henderson is good. You hate Dafne Keen on a molecular level. It's fine. But we get to the roly-poly scene. And yes, I mean, and maybe in one version of script, there was a big fight, but
I'm sure there was.
Osha is the one that wakes the roly-poly up. Roly-poly goes away. Roly-poly's flying. This is the first scene where Yord doesn't pull his lightsaber. Instead, we have Sol saying, I have it. He turns the lightsaber on. The thing charges. He slices it. And again, I turn the subtitles on just so I know what everyone is saying. And the one Jedi's like, it went straight for the light. And it's like, okay, so that's coming back in the next episode. Got it. What you do is the one dies. They all wake up. Suddenly you get this big lightsaber versus roly-poly battle, and the only one that the roly-polies aren't going for is Osha, because she doesn't have the lightsaber on, but also because her force abilities have been reignited, and she's the one that essentially saves the day and says, turn off your lightsabers. The light goes away, they go away. Like, there's a way to make a cool scene, but you also get a little bit of character development. You
remove the guilt that she felt afterwards, that her touching it had killed. That's a great point, Shannon. I love that, actually. Okay.
So then we get to Kelnacca's place. Them having Osha in the back. I like the reveal. I think you could have gone further, because at some point day kind of turns into night. But instead of day turning into night, I want to say that the very presence of this Sith Lord darkens the sky.
I think I think it does. If you go back and watch
is that what it is?
I think that is what happened. I mean, like there is a moment where, and Star Wars, very famously, and again, Leslye Headland leaning into a lot of the things that Star Wars does. Like, I think it's on Osha where you clearly see it actually go darker rapidly.
Yeah.
So I think they actually did do that.
I think it should have gone further. I think there needs to be a disturbance in the Force that all of the Jedi feel that they're like, something's not right, because Dafne Keen's delivery of that one line, what is that? There is so much fear and apprehension in that line that I wish that the environment would have supported it a little bit more. Yeah. So I will push back slightly on what Vogel says, that he hurls Osha away. I don't think he hurls away. He gets her out of the way because ultimately he needs Osha.
Right.
So he does not want her bones to crack. He's getting her out of the way.
I agree. Let me be clear. I agree that he doesn't want to kill Osha and he wants her. The way it was shot, I was like, that bitch dead.
You saw the legs go in frame. I think you saw the legs go in frame.
You didn't see the soft, cushy bale of hay that she fell into. Again, along with the lightsaber battle, the hay budget, very, very low on this.
Yeah, true.
But you have this 25-minute slog through this episode to get to something really cool. And then these are not cliffhangers. These are wall smashers. I mean, this is a car running straight into a wall. And it's kind of like, you know what? You could actually cut this scene up. You could have the battle start and you get Soul, you get Jecki, you get someone that we care about in a very vulnerable position. And that's where you end it. Because when you have an episode that is about 30 minutes, it's just like, give us a little bit more. And that's, I think, the most egregious sin that the show has made is like, you got to give us a little bit more.
But even without adding anything to what they're doing, like even without saying, oh, we're putting someone in danger or whatever, it's really just how it's shot. They just do these abrupt endings. Like, so like the Jedi light their lightsabers, all the lightsabers come on, Qimir just goes like whoosh, and the smoke comes out and they all fall backwards. But instead of just cutting on that like kind of random side shot, then you like sort of cut to all the Jedi on the ground and you pan up, and with the moons behind him, he stands up and he's framed in the moonlight with his red lightsaber, and then you cut out. That even would have worked. Like, it's like you don't even need to add more stuff to what they with most of the endings. When you look at what happens, it's less about, oh, I needed an extra moment, or I needed an added piece, or I needed another piece of dialogue. Where they chose to end these things, I mean, I agree that I thought this episode was too short, but like where they chose to end these things is oftentimes as fine a place as any to do it, but they're not doing that final moment where you're like, okay, that's the end of this chapter of this serialized space opera.
Yeah. Good point. Okay, so any final words on this? Where are we going? And Michael, I think you were correct on this on talking about Qimir, because Leslye Headland, as I said, watching interviews this week and over the weekend, she said that in her approach to this, there is a master, there is an apprentice, and there is an acolyte. So it's very clearly, you might be right that Qimir is, because I've been resisting that he is the ultimate baddie, because I'm like, it's too easy to figure out way too early in a murder, quote unquote, murder mystery. So the fact that he may be the second rung on the ladder, as opposed not the top rung, I think I can accept a little bit more. And it's an interesting twist. And now where do we go from here? But what are your thoughts now? The first 4 episodes are done. We're halfway through this series. Where are we going? What do you anticipate here as we wrap up this spoiler review?
It's going to be interesting to see where it ends, because like, look, and we've talked about this, I know that a lot of our audience grew up with the prequels and just loves them dearly. I think the prequels fall into the same category for me, which when you get past the actual execution of the prequels, which I do not think is great, and the dialogue in the prequels, which I do not think is great, the events that happen in the prequels are actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so what's happening here is kind of the same thing to me, which is I don't love this execution, and I think a lot of the dialogue is not serving them, but the bigger scope of what's happening, which is, and again, we're keeping what actually happened back in the day, very shady. Did the master somehow manipulate the witches into making Osha and May because the master wanted a Force dyad. Is all of this an effort to bring Osha and May together because they need a Force dyad to do a thing? And Qimir is the apprentice, and he's been leading them along, but he knew all along that they needed Osha as well as May. And so this is all in an effort to bring them together before the master. And everything that's been happened is a plot. And then the events of this, what happens here, are going to get covered up hardcore by the Jedi when it's done, so that nobody really does know that the Sith are back. And then what Ki-Ad-Mundi says in Phantom Menace, we're like, oh, this bitch. Like, there's a version here that when we get done with this and we all talk about how this shot wasn't great and this acting was wooden and they should have maybe brought this moment a little bit further earlier, whatever, all the things that are not working from a execution standpoint, the bigger scope of this story as part of the Star Wars lore, and that this original Force dyad that led to this, that gave Plagueis the idea, that inspired him, and then he told Palpatine, and then Palpatine killed him and told Anakin, and the whole thing led to the thing. Like, it all might fit really, really well. But man, and I said this the other day because we've been reviewing them, but when we're reviewing House of the Dragon, The Boys, Doctor Who, and The Acolyte, and 3 of those 4 are being executed, in my opinion, really, really well. And one of them is not. It kind of makes the one that's not stand out a lot.
I mean, Doctor Who has issues. No, I'm joking. Shannon, your final thoughts on this particular episode and where we're going?
I mean, we're halfway through now. We've hit the peak. We're going down the mountain. Look, at this point, again, historically, based off of the shows that I think have not stuck the landing, it doesn't feel like this one is going to either. For you folks that are enjoying it, I am absolutely thrilled for you. I hope you are enjoying the hell out of the show. Never let anybody yuck your yum. For me personally, there's just so many little potholes that to me are easy rookie mistakes that it's so easy to fix. And again, each show is different. The Acolyte is not The Boys, is not Doctor Who, is not House of the Dragon. That being said, as Vogel already put, when you see one, or in this case, I'm assuming 3 because I don't watch Doctor Who, but when you're seeing other shows nail these things so well, and a lot of the talent involved has worked across multiple franchises, it's like, why is this one not working, and why is this not the first one of the Star Wars live action shows? Why are these not working? And it kind of sucks. I mean, I hope beyond hope that the next 4 episodes turn me right around. Nothing would make me happier. But at this point, I'm kind of going in not with a prejudice, but I am going in with more realistic expectations.
Well, because you have 4 episodes that you've watched, you have a right to go in with like the eyebrow raised a little bit and the arms folded, because we've seen 4 episodes. And as Michael said, there are good things that are happening in these episodes, but it just it doesn't have the weight. It's so lightweight. It doesn't have the strength. The characters' development is not as strong. There's just not enough to hold on to here. And the execution is really undercutting what you wanted to accomplish here. So to be worried about these next 4 episodes or going a little skeptical, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But what you said is great, Shannon. You're also creating hope that, look, it might turn around. It might work. You just never know, because we are still only 4 episodes into an 8-episode series. We can't really judge it fully until it's done. So maybe these next 4 episodes will turn us around on some of the issues we had, and we'll understand why they went the route they went. But I have the feeling like you felt. This is where I felt around Ahsoka. I think after the 3rd or 4th episode, where I was like, oh no, it's starting to do that thing that it does, and I sense that may be where we're coming now. Michael, you want to say one more thing?
Yeah, and look, I want to figure out the right way to say this, because you're right. Like, look, when you look at social media right now, the discourse is there's a lot of people that are like, I love this show, I love Star Wars. And then there's a lot of people that are just treating The Acolyte like it's the worst thing that's ever happened to Star Wars. And I'm like, guys, we had a holiday special. Calm the fuck down. Like, we've had some things. But like, I think that what's really happening with Star Wars in a bigger picture sense is that Lucasfilm is unsure how to move Star Wars forward. And that's pretty apparent in the way that a lot of things have been executed as of late. And I think that there are real and valid critiques about the way Star Wars works right now. But I think those are being overshadowed by some very nasty, toxic critiques about diversity and pronouns and LGBTQ and people of color and all these other things that are getting wrapped into it that just are like really ridiculous. And so it's hard because I think like both sides, like you have people that love Star Wars that are like, I feel like I have to fight against this ridiculous toxicity and these toxic people that are just like, everything that's wrong is horrible and it's the worst thing ever. And it makes it hard to actually be someone who loves a brand and go, look, I love this brand. I'm always going to love this brand. But I also want to talk about like what's not working so that we can make it better.
That's what I'm proud of our show, because I think we told the middle. I think we're valid when on criticism. We're honest with our criticism, and then we're honest with our praise. And we have to be like Braveheart. We have to hold because people want to yank you one way or another. The middle has to hold in Star Wars or any franchise for it to stay alive. And I do find a little bit of hypocrisy that some of these prequel lovers are shitting on the new Star Wars, because you're clearly not aware of the historical place that you're in, because we shit on the prequel trilogy, and for my opinion, rightfully so, for a lot of reasons. You all now are doing the exact same things. Some of you who were upset at some of the attacks on the prequel trilogy, you're attacking just as with as much vitriol this new Star Wars, this Disney Star Wars, as people attack the prequel trilogy. And so it's just like, we've got to have more perspective and more awareness. And what Shannon said is right. If you like it, nothing we say should keep you from liking it. Enjoy it. If you love it, that's totally cool. We just have to come with our honest analysis and criticism, but we hold out hope that it could turn around. So.
And I think the Braveheart example is a really good one because Mel Gibson is famously non-toxic.
I'm talking about a movie, not the person. Anyway, all right. Freedom. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us here for this spoiler review for episode 4, day of the first season of The Acolyte. Who knows? The second season, maybe it's a limited series. We'll see. We appreciate it madly. Shannon, what do we have to tell them?
Yeah, if you'd like to follow us on social media, on Twitter, it's at @geek_buddies, on Instagram at @the_geek_buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you'd like to follow Mr. Vogel, it is at MK2. And if you'd like to follow Mr. Rocha and share in his hatred of Dafne Keen, it's at The Rocha Says.
How dare you? Mike.
Go ahead and smash that like button below. We would really appreciate it. Subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page. Check out all the amazing content he has got there. He's got geek stuff galore for you to explore. Leave your comments below. If you loved this episode, tell us why you loved it. If you hated this episode, tell us why you hated it. If you got toxic shit to say, take it somewhere else. If you are listening to us on a podcast, go ahead and leave us some stars and some comments in the rankings so we go up there. And as always, the best thing you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
Yeah, and some programming notes. We have our main show coming up later on this week. We're going to review The Boys. We just reviewed The Acolyte as well. Michael and I are reviewing the Doctor Who stuff. And if you want to watch my reaction videos, I reacted to The Acolyte. It's up now for this particular episode, and I'll be doing that subsequently throughout the season as well. So those are a lot of stuff you can get from us here on the Geek Buddies. All right, take care of yourselves. Be well. And we'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review episode here of the
Geek
Buddies. Hey!